You see men who look grown, yet move through life as if still waiting for permission to begin. They laugh off responsibility, chase distraction, and expect others to carry the weight they avoid. You call it immaturity, but Jung saw something deeper. The Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy who resists growing up, not because he cannot, but because he will not. Ask yourself how many men in your circle hide their fear of adulthood behind charm or rebellion. How many insist they are free spirits when in truth they are fugitives from responsibility? And how often have you mistaken avoidance for innocence, immaturity for playfulness, or dependency for vulnerability? The man-child does not only fail himself, he burdens those around him. Partners become parents, colleagues become caretakers, families become enablers. His refusal to grow up forces others to grow up twice. Do you see how quickly admiration for his spontaneity turns into resentment for his irresponsibility? Jung's warning is severe. What is denied in oneself will surface in others. When a man refuses his shadow, discipline, endurance, courage, he projects it outward and depends on others to supply it. But this dependency corrodes love, work, and dignity. So the question falls to you: are you dealing with a man who will not grow, or are you secretly living as one yourself? And if so, how long will you keep calling it personality when it is really captivity to a boy who refuses to die? You live in a culture that glorifies youth, but beneath the surface lurks something more corrosive: the refusal to grow. You see it in men who cling to adolescence long after their bodies have aged, avoiding responsibility, chasing novelty, and excusing immaturity as freedom. Jung gave this figure a name: the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. He is not simply young at heart, he is trapped, unwilling to cross the threshold into full adulthood. Ask yourself, how many men do you know who can speak endlessly about dreams but never build them into form? How many stay dependent on mothers, partners, or friends while pretending their avoidance is independence? How often do you excuse someone's irresponsibility because you fear that naming it would mean losing them? And in quieter moments, do you catch glimpses of this pattern in yourself? Those places where you resist the demands of maturity because they feel too heavy, too final. The context is not only personal but cultural. A society addicted to comfort, entertainment, and distraction feeds the archetype of the eternal boy. Responsibility is delayed, adulthood postponed, sovereignty exchanged for endless play. Yet Jung reminds you that what is not integrated does not disappear, it festers. The man-child drains others of their energy, turning lovers into caretakers, colleagues into shields, families into enablers. This is not freedom, it is regression disguised as charm. To understand why some men never grow up, you must face the archetypal reality. Immaturity is not harmless, it is parasitic. The question is not whether the man-child exists around you, he does. The sharper question is whether you will continue tolerating his evasion, or whether you will confront the places where he still lives in you. At the core of Jung's psychology stands the archetype of the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy. He is not merely youthful, not simply playful, but trapped in refusal. He longs for freedom without cost, creativity without labor, love without responsibility. You see him in men who resist the weight of adulthood, who prefer fantasy over form, dreams over discipline. Jung warns that the puer may appear radiant, imaginative, even inspiring, yet beneath the glow lies a refusal to grow. Ask yourself, are you drawn to such men, excusing their immaturity as charm? Or do you notice echoes of the eternal boy within yourself, avoiding responsibility under the guise of freedom? The persona plays a crucial role here. The man-child polishes a mask of likability, humor, and charm. He seems light-hearted, spontaneous, endlessly fun. But this mask hides the shadow, discipline, endurance, authority, limits that he refuses to own. The more he avoids the shadow, the more others must carry it. Partners pick up the bills, bosses absorb the work, friends shoulder the crises. Do you see how quickly his persona collapses into dependency, forcing others into roles he refuses to inhabit? Complexes deepen the pattern. The mother complex is especially potent. Men bound by it often remain emotionally tied to maternal care, seeking partners who will nurture them, forgive them, and rescue them. Responsibility feels suffocating because it threatens the bond of dependency. Have you witnessed men who, even in adulthood, call their mothers for comfort while resenting father figures who demand maturity? And can you see how this unresolved complex keeps them chained to adolescence, no matter their age? Projection intensifies the trap. The man-child often projects his denied qualities onto others, expecting women to embody structure, fathers to embody strength, colleagues to embody discipline. He insists he is a free spirit, but in truth, he depends on others to live out the very traits he refuses. Ask yourself, how often have you carried someone's responsibility because they refused it? And when you did you realize you were being used as their projection screen? Archetypal tension emerges between the puer and the mature hero. The hero accepts challenge, risk, and endurance as the path to sovereignty. The puer resists, seeking escape from labor into endless play. Yet every life demands choice. Will you cross the threshold of responsibility, or will you retreat into the false safety of immaturity? And if you retreat, how long before charm rots into resentment, both in yourself and in those around you? Jung makes the warning clear. The Puer Aeternus is not just a personality quirk, it is a psychic wound. Left unchecked, it consumes vitality, corrodes relationships, and arrests individuation. You cannot become whole while clinging to eternal boyhood. Real freedom requires integration, accepting both lightness and weight, imagination and discipline, freedom and responsibility. So the theoretical ground is stern. The man-child lives through persona, avoids his shadow, clings to the mother complex, projects his denied traits onto others, and refuses the hero's call. The cost is not only his own stagnation, but the exploitation of those around him. The question is no longer abstract, but personal. Where do you see the Puer Aeternus ruling out there in others or in here within yourself? And when will you stop excusing immaturity as innocence and start naming it as captivity to a boy who refuses to die? Picture the workplace. A man in his 30s still behaves like the intern who never left. He jokes, he charms, he makes himself likable. At first you forgive his missed deadlines. He's creative. He'll get it done in his own time. But slowly you realize you are carrying his load. He avoids the hard tasks, turns meetings into performances, and vanishes when responsibility presses. His persona entertains, but his shadow, discipline, endurance, authority remains unclaimed. Who pays the cost? Not him, but you and every colleague who cleans up his chaos. Have you ever excused such behavior as harmless, even while resentment grew? Now look at relationships. The man-child enters love not as a partner, but as a son disguised as a lover. At first, his spontaneity feels intoxicating. Dates are adventures, plans are impulsive, the air is full of possibility. But over time, the weight falls on you. You remind him to pay bills, manage the schedule, keep promises. You notice he resents you for asking the simplest things: commitment, follow-through, responsibility. Do you see the reversal? The partner becomes the parent, the lover becomes the caretaker. And every request for maturity he interprets as nagging, as if adulthood were a burden unfairly thrust upon him. How long before charm curdles into exhaustion? Consider family ties. The man-child often clings to his mother long past the natural threshold. She provides comfort, excuses, and rescue. Meanwhile, he resents father figures or any authority that demands growth. He seeks the shelter of nurture but rejects the challenge of discipline. Have you seen grown men return home for every crisis, calling mother first while scorning anyone who asks them to stand on their own? Do you recognize how this dependency keeps them bound to boyhood, no matter their age? The same pattern repeats in social life. The man-child is often the center of the group, quick with jokes, alive with energy. But when the night ends and real demands surface, rent, conflict, decisions, he withdraws. Friends cover his gaps, pay his share, tolerate his vanishing. He thrives on being the boy of the moment, while others quietly grow resentful of carrying his adulthood for him. Ask yourself, do you admire his carefree nature? Or do you see that it survives only because someone else pays the hidden cost? These examples are not rare. They are ordinary, repeating, relentless. You encounter them in offices, families, relationships, friendships. The eternal boy lives not in strangers, but in the men you already know, and perhaps in places within yourself you prefer not to admit. The pattern is the same: persona of charm, shadow, denied responsibility, evaded dependency, disguised as innocence. Each scene shows the same law. When a man refuses to grow, others must grow for him. Now the question falls back on you. How many times have you tolerated immaturity under the name of kindness? How many times have you cleaned up someone else's mess, calling it love? And how many places in your own life do you still resist the burden of responsibility, convincing yourself it is freedom? The examples expose the truth. Immaturity is never neutral, it is parasitic. The real danger is not that some men never grow up, but that others keep enabling them to remain eternal boys. Will you keep playing the caretaker, or will you begin demanding proportion from them and from yourself? The man-child is not just a personality quirk. It is a system, psychic, bodily, relational, designed to resist maturity. If you study the gears, you will see why this pattern endures and why it drains everyone around it. First, the physiological mechanism. Responsibility activates anxiety. When a bill arrives, when a deadline looms, when a partner asks for commitment, the man-child's nervous system registers danger. His body seeks relief through avoidance, gaming, drinking, joking, disappearing. He mistakes temporary escape for freedom, yet all it buys him is a deeper fear of weight. Ask yourself, when you face pressure, do you lean into it or do you retreat into distraction under the disguise of taking it easy? How often is your relaxation simply flight from maturity? Second, the cognitive mechanism. Rationalization provides cover. The man-child insists, life is short, enjoy it, or I'm just not made for rules. These lines are not philosophy, they are shields against responsibility. He reframes avoidance as authenticity, convincing himself and others that immaturity is a lifestyle choice rather than captivity. Do you catch yourself excusing delay as patience or dependence as openness? How many of your reasons are really just defenses for inertia? Third, the energetic mechanism. Psychic energy flows into play, novelty, and dependency, leaving little for building or enduring. Ambition is fantasized, never enacted. Dreams remain castles in the air because the energy meant for labor is spent maintaining comfort. When was the last time you pursued something difficult long enough for it to transform you rather than abandoning it at the first sign of weight? Fourth, the reinforcement mechanism. Every time the man-child avoids responsibility and someone else rescues him, the pattern deepens. Partners clean up messes, colleagues cover gaps, mothers soften failures. Each rescue tells him, you can remain a boy. Others will carry adulthood for you. But the same law applies to you each time you tolerate immaturity in yourself. You train your psyche that avoidance is safety. Which habits are you reinforcing right now? Endurance or evasion? Fifth, the complex mechanism. The mother complex keeps him emotionally tethered. Dependency feels safer than independence. Comfort is chosen over growth. When father figures or authority demand maturity, resentment rises, not gratitude. You may think you have outgrown this, but reflect, how often do you secretly long for someone else to handle the weight for you? How often do you recoil when challenge demands you finally stand on your own feet? Sixth, the projection mechanism. The man-child projects the very qualities he denies, discipline, authority, courage, onto others. Partners become responsible adults in his stead. Friends embody structure, bosses shoulder accountability. He depends on others to enact his shadow. But projection works both ways. How often do you unconsciously push your unclaimed maturity onto others, then resent them for being controlling? Seventh, the ethical mechanism. Immaturity is never private. Every refusal to grow up burdens someone else. A partner becomes a parent, a team becomes a crutch, a family becomes an enabler. The man-child thinks he is choosing freedom, but in truth, he is enslaving those around him to roles they never agreed to carry. Look closely. Who has been forced to grow up for you? And who are you still growing up for because they refuse to? The mechanism in some is not accidental. It is systemic. Body avoids stress, mind rationalizes. Energy leaks, rescues. Reinforce, complexes. Bind, projections. Ethics, collapse. Left unchecked, the cycle repeats indefinitely. The eternal boy is not innocent. He is parasitic thriving because others carry the weight he drops. So the question presses, where does this system still live in you? In which corner of your life do you retreat, excuse, project, or depend on rescue instead of shouldering weight? And when faced with men around you who refuse to grow, will you keep enabling their immaturity, or will you finally break the cycle by refusing to carry what is not yours? Freedom requires weight. The only question is whether you will bear it or leave it for others to carry while you remain a boy. If you recognize the eternal boy in others or in yourself, the work begins with practice, not theory. Freedom from immaturity is not won in abstractions, but in the smallest disciplines carried daily. Each act is a hinge. Either you reinforce adolescence or you embody maturity. The choice is relentless. Begin with observation. You cannot change what you refuse to name. Where do you avoid responsibility under the mask of charm, rebellion, or distraction? Where do you wait for someone else to clean up your mess, soothe your fear, or shoulder your obligations? Write it down without excuse. Ask yourself how much of your week is spent avoiding weight rather than carrying it, and who is carrying that weight in your place. Second, install boundaries with man-children in your life. If you continue rescuing, you continue enabling. Partners must stop parenting. Colleagues must stop covering. Families must stop excusing. When you withdraw rescue, the boy faces his own collapse, and sometimes only collapse awakens growth. Ask plainly, how many times have you softened someone else's fall, only to watch the same pattern repeat? How long before you admit that your help is prolonging their captivity? Third, reclaim shadow. The man-child fears his shadow, discipline, structure, endurance, so he outsources it to others. You must reverse the habit. Anger can guard your thresholds. Discipline can hold your commitments. Rest can restore wattage. Which shadow trait have you exiled that could become your ally? Do you dare call anger a sentinel instead of a sin structure? A container instead of a prison? Responsibility a path instead of a curse? Fourth practice, small acts of endurance. Maturity is not seized in a single leap, but in a repetition of weight-bearing. Cook your own meal instead of expecting service. Pay your bill on time without drama. Finish one task fully before chasing another distraction. The psyche learns by repetition. Each completed act rewires the nervous system from avoidance to sovereignty. Which small act today could break the cycle of delay, excuse, and escape? 5. Confront the mother complex. If you remain bound to comfort, you cannot grow. This means letting go of rescue, emotional, financial, or practical, from those who have coddled your boyhood. You must cut the tether. Can you endure the discomfort of standing on your own, or will you keep retreating to the old arms that soothe but suffocate? What bond must you release so you can breathe the air of adulthood? 6th, refuse projection. Stop outsourcing discipline, courage, and responsibility to those around you. When you catch yourself resenting someone as controlling or nagging, pause and ask, are they embodying the maturity I refuse to claim? Instead of rebelling against their steadiness, learn to carry it yourself. Who in your life have you condemned for carrying the traits you secretly need to grow? 7th, rehearse responsibility. Each morning, picture the moment that usually undoes you: the bill, the deadline, the request from a partner. Visualize the pause, the breath, the choice to act instead of evade. By the time the real demand arrives, your nervous system will already know the choreography. Will you keep leaving maturity to improvisation, or will you train it into muscle memory? Finally, publish your cadence. Tell your partner, your friends, your colleagues the discipline you are practicing. No more rescues, no more excuses, no more retreat into boyhood. Freedom that is hidden becomes eccentricity. Freedom declared becomes culture. Do you want to keep defending your growth as a private quirk, or will you make it public so others can hold you to it? The practice is merciless but clear. Observe evasion, set boundaries, reclaim shadow, endure small tasks, confront the mother complex, refuse projection, rehearse responsibility, publish your cadence. Repeat until boyhood gives way to proportion, until charm is tempered by endurance, until freedom is no longer escape but sovereignty. So the final question is simple. Will you continue excusing immaturity as personality, or will you break the cycle with discipline? Will you keep letting others grow up in your place, or will you shoulder the weight yourself? Freedom without responsibility is regression. The only test is whether you will bear the weight today. The man-child is not a harmless figure of comedy. He is the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy, Jung warned about, a psyche arrested in growth, charming on the surface, but parasitic beneath. Left unchecked, he drains partners, burdens families, and destabilizes communities. Avoiding responsibility may feel like freedom, but it is a counterfeit. Every refusal to grow chains you tighter to adolescence. Ask yourself, have you confused charm with character, spontaneity with sovereignty, or escape with independence? The truth is, severe immaturity is not private. It forces others to live double lives. When a man refuses to grow, his partner becomes the parent, his colleagues become the caretakers, his family becomes the shield. Is that the legacy you want to leave, that others had to mature in your place? Or will you accept that the weight you avoid today will eventually crush both you and those who love you? Jung's warning aligns with life's demand. Individuation requires carrying both freedom and responsibility. You cannot be whole while clinging to boyhood. You cannot claim sovereignty while outsourcing discipline to others. The eternal boy may feel alive for a time, but sooner or later his evasion curdles into resentment from himself and from everyone around him. So the call is direct. Name one place in your life where you still live as a boy. Where do you hide from responsibility, expecting others to rescue you? Where do you still resist the shadow qualities, discipline, endurance, courage that could make you whole? Write it down and decide which single act today would mark your passage into adulthood. Freedom without weight is regression. Sovereignty begins when you stop evading and start carrying. The question now presses back. Will you keep excusing immaturity as personality, or will you finally shoulder the burden that makes you a man?